Hey guys, it is now June 30th, 2022, and we are halfway through the year. So now I will be reviewing all the superhero movies and TV shows that have come out this year in one video. The next one of these will come out on December 30th, 2022, where I will review all the ones that have come out since then. So let's get started. But first, hi, my name is Tyler and I love film. And today, I will be talking about the 2022 superhero movies and TV shows, which ironically are only Marvel and DC. The first one I will be starting off with is Peacemaker. First, I will say, this show isn't the greatest, but I love it. Even though the first episode is pretty rough and the direction isn't anything special, and the writing sure is, the comedy in the show is great. It has a perfect combination of meta, situational, and raunchy humor. James Gunn does stuff in the show that he's never ever been able to do in any Marvel thing. And this show takes many jabs at the current DC continuity and uses D-list characters and makes them seemingly iconic, like he had with the Guardians of the Galaxy. The perfectly balanced tone of the show is also one of its saving graces. It's ultra-violent, funny, but also has moments of pure heart, and it is perfectly campy and ironic at the same time. The action in this show was also freaking awesome. Peacemaker's character gets his time to shine, along with newcomer Vigilante and the rest of the supporting cast of the show, who are all perfectly cast and perfectly entertaining. Even though the villain of the show is pretty weak and dumb, Peacemaker's character does save the show, showing his tragic backstory, his completely effed up psyche. That is my review of Peacemaker, and I suggest that you watch it for yourself. I give this show an 8.8 out of 10. Out of all the 2022 films I've seen thus far, The Batman has easily been the best, and is a nearly perfect Batman story, and at least the most perfect one and most faithful one that we've gotten. From the direction, writing, and story to the sound design, cinematography, lighting, and overall production design, with a perfect modern Gotham City that combines the Art Deco look of the Burton films with a more noirish, realistic feel. This film seems to have it all, and seems to have everything that you want from a Batman movie, including a great character arc and a great villain. The film also has a great score, world building, action, special effects, and practical effects, with some great action choreography, costumes, and a lot of visual flair. Of all the Batman films, this is easily the most faithful, from the romance with Catwoman to the feeling of Gotham City being a gothic nightmare, portraying Batman as an addict of adrenaline. And at the end of the movie, we get a glimpse of a drug that he injects into himself to keep him moving, to keep him awake during all the sleepless, nightmarish nights. Other than that, the movie is a lot of fun and feels refreshingly pulpy. Overall, the film really services the icon of Batman and is a fantastic, phenomenal, and refreshing reimagining and new characterization rendition of all these characters and the Batman mythos. The film overall has striking themes: surveillance, corruption, loneliness, addiction, and darkness, amongst others, making the film feel reminiscent of films such as The Conversation, Taxi Driver, and Chinatown. Easily the best movie I've seen all year, and it continues to prove that for the last 2 years, DC has been beating out Marvel in quality by far. I give this film a 9.3 out of 10. The first entry of the Marvel Cinematic Universe this year was quite a disappointment for me. Moon Knight is such a cool character in the comics, and there's many different interpretations of him. The recent interpretations have been allegories for mental health and interpretations of cosmic science and Greek gods. He can be a harrowing vigilante. He could be a brutal punisher, a literal god, a mystical guardian, or a man with multiple personalities. But this show really doesn't utilize the concept of Moon Knight as much as it should, only using 2 of his personalities throughout the show, underutilizing his mythological origins, and completely misunderstanding the character of Moon Knight as a whole. The quality of the show overall is honestly all over the place and a mixed bag. The story is a mess. The character of Moon Knight is inconsistent and uninteresting. Oscar Isaac gives a great performance, but the character writing doesn't let it shine. Moon Knight does not go under a very interesting character arc throughout the show, and a lot of the stuff near the ending is convoluted, contrived, and even generic. Overall, I was very disappointed with this show because it could have been so great, so dark, such a refreshing thing for the MCU, but as I should have expected, it wasn't. While Moon Knight is spotty with its CGI, characters, and story alike, disrespects the lore, and doesn't let its themes of dependence, self-sacrifice, justice, revenge, and trauma shine through, as shown in the Asylum episodes. I give this show an 8.1 out of 10. The next film is Morbius, a film that I almost forgot to put on here. And it exists now for some reason. Honestly, I don't hate it as much as everybody else, and I probably enjoy it a little more than I should. But the film is too generic, uninspired, uninteresting, and lackluster to learn anything else but a failing rating from me. I give this film a 5.9 out of 10. Next is Sam Raimi's second Steve Ditko-based Marvel superhero movie. And naturally, as a Sam Raimi movie, this film does a lot of interesting things visually, and at least looks refreshing for the rest of the MCU. There is some fascinating camera movements, nice colors, and just eye-catching visuals that wouldn't have been possible without Sam Raimi. The film also has a definitive and interesting style, visually at least, and has a great score. But I must say, I'm overall disappointed with this film. It is very clear that Marvel Studios had meddled with Sam Raimi's vision, and clear from the whole script of the movie, many things were written last minute and taken out last minute, like the inclusion of the main villain being the villain Nightmare. Also, that green bull thing that was in the background of the movie was pretty cool. But despite this, the themes of happiness and the power of choice do shine through in this movie and are pretty powerful once we reach the end. And Doctor Strange's character journey is pretty much the saving grace for this film. I like Wanda Maximoff's turn as the villain in this movie. I think her performance is great, and she was the perfect alternate villain for this movie. And I do appreciate the references to other Marvel Comics lore, such as the Book of Ashanti, the Darkhold, the Living Tribunal, the Baxter Building, 616, even though that was a pretty dumb one, and the inclusion of the Illuminati and Clea. I feel like the film doesn't do enough interesting things with these characters and use its concept of the multiverse correctly, which leaves the film feeling pretty underwhelming and half-baked, which every other aspect of the film pretty much feels. The film barely makes out Wanda to be a good villain, gives Doctor Strange a good character arc, and barely allows its themes to be resonant. This film had a lot of wasted potential and did disappoint me and many others. I still like it and enjoyed it. I give this film an 8.3 out of 10. As of right now, there are 4 episodes of Miss Marvel out on Disney+. And I feel that it's safe for me to give my overall opinion since the show is mostly over. If my opinion changes even slightly, I'll make a standalone video on this. But for now, these are my thoughts on the show. I don't expect to be having to make a separate video. This show feels very lackluster. It tries to substitute its lack of substance with style, with a bunch of poppy energy and erratic visuals. The show really isn't interesting. It does go in some cool places and do different things with Kamala Khan's powers that weren't done in the comics, which is nice because her powers are pretty disinteresting in the comics. But the character as a whole doesn't draw you in. The show doesn't draw you in. It doesn't have an entertaining tone or really good characters that stand out. The show feels very generic, and that's not something I want to get from the show, but it's what I was expecting. I barely passed the show and give it a 6.7.